I would say that there are 7 players in the NBA that pretty much everyone would agree on when we're talking about the best players in the league. Number 1 would be LeBron James, and then after that, they're in no particular order, so don't freak out. There's Anthony Davis, who has made a lot of strides as a two-way player while being an awesome athlete at the power forward position. There is Russell Westbrook, whose usage rate is higher than Snoop Dogg on, well, pretty much any day of the week for Snoop. James Harden, whose defense is what it is, but because the guy is such a leader on offense that you kind of just deal with the things that he doesn't do well. There's Kawhi Leonard, whose defense is not a problem. His playmaking may not be to James Harden's standards, and I may say that every single time I talk about Kawhi Leonard, but he's awesome nonetheless. And then we have a set of players on the Golden State Warriors. My question is, after these 7 guys, who are going to be the next 3 players? Who's going to fill out the top 10 players in the NBA of 2018? Well, I have like 5 real choices, I guess, here. One of which is John Wall, who I think just keeps on getting better at the point guard position for the Wizards. An awesome leader. There's Giannis, who's, if I'm not mistaken, 23 years old at the moment. And given that he's not even close to his ceiling, it's actually pretty scary how good he could be. Chris Paul, who has been a mainstay among the top 10 players in the NBA for quite a while now. Super efficient, low turnovers, fantastic playmaker. Paul George, Russell Westbrook's newest teammate, who's always been kind of hovering around there, and I think he's in a perfect situation. Another one's Jimmy Butler, who, similar to John Wall, he just keeps on getting better, man. But first, we got to talk about a bunch of other guys before I talk about those dudes specifically. Klay Thompson, I'm a big fan of Klay. His defense is great, the shooting is what it is, and when he gets hot, there might not be anyone better in the league, but I just don't think he's enough of a creator. He's usually like the, third option on this Golden State team. Isaiah Thomas, me being a Celtics fan, I may love the guy, and he had a fantastic season for them a year ago, but the defense is what it is, and when you are that bad on one side of the floor, I don't know if you can be in this discussion, even though James Harden's in it, but shut up. Gordon Hayward, I just don't know if his scoring is ever going to be high enough. I mean, he, averaged 21, 22 points a game. Is he ever going to get to like 27, 28 a game? I don't know about that. We have Kyrie Irving. Similar to Isaiah Thomas, I just think the defense isn't good enough, and I don't think he does enough offensively as a playmaker to make up for that. Kyle Lowry, I mean, his previous year was really good for Toronto. I think part of the reason why I wouldn't put him in the discussion is because he's been pretty weak in the playoffs, and that, of course, matters when we're discussing the top dudes in the NBA, and I don't know, Lowry's just been disappointing there quite a few times. I only have DeMar DeRozan here because I don't want people to get mad at me in the comments section, although now that I gave him that qualifier, they're going to get mad at me anyway. Joel Embiid's interesting. I mean, look, if the dude plays like 35 minutes a game and is completely healthy, I mean, maybe he'll be in this because of how good he was in his rookie season, but I think that's a lot to ask for, so maybe we're like a year too early on Embiid, but I'm sure he'll be in the top 10 soon enough. Rudy Gobert, he definitely elevated himself this season. I just don't think his offensive game is going to go to a level where we can really put him here. Even if he averages like 15 or 16 a game, I still don't think it'll be enough. Marc Gasol, weirdly enough, had his best season at the age of 32 years old. I mean, the rebounding is pretty weak. And as much of a helpful player as he is, at a certain point, you just might not be good enough. And I think that's just what it is with Marc Gasol. Damian Lillard, similar to Isaiah and Kyrie with the lack of defense. Now, of course, I'm risking that he's going to see this video and then tweet it out, and then I'm going to get a whole bunch of Damian Lillard fans who are mad at me on Twitter. But I might get some views as well, so we might be okay with it. DeMarcus Cousins, I mean, look at, man. The history of being a bad teammate, bullying other people, being unpleasant to work with, on top of the temper tantrums he throws on the floor, with his decline on defense, he's going to have to surprise me this season. Karl Anthony Towns, I mean, from a production standpoint, yeah, he could already be in this discussion. I just think he's going to have to make strides on the defensive side of the floor. Defense is important, is what I'm getting at with a lot of these. Blake Griffin, I don't think Blake's going to have some drastic production increase because Chris Paul is gone. He was already shooting the ball more than CP3 anyway, on top of Chris Paul helped him get easier baskets, so I don't see Blake just exploding without Chris Paul on his team. I love Draymond Green for the impact he makes on both sides of the floor, but his efficiency really wasn't good this previous year. Didn't shoot well from the field or from three-point land. And, I mean, what does he average? 10, 11 points a game? Like, I understand he's great, but at a certain point, you just got to put more points up. Chris Paul is going to be a little shorter here, even though I had him as one of the 5 guys. I fear that his health is going to be the problem. He played 60 games this previous year. I mean, if he does that again and John Wall plays like 80 games, then I think John Wall's probably just a better player at that point. But also, his usage might be a bit down because he's playing with James Harden, which might be good to extend his career and all that, but when it comes to this sort of a discussion, CP3 may take a dip. Now we can get to John Wall. I'm like decently confident he's going to become one of the 10 best players in the league this season because, I mean, just look at his previous season for the Wizards. 23 points, 11 assists. They got to round 2, even though their bench is terrible and Scott Brooks is Scott Brooks. And defensively, I'd say he's dropped off a little bit, but he's still a plus defensive player. And I think we're just going to see the same thing from him this season, or maybe even a little bit more progression. The three-point shot is still the big question with him. I don't think he's ever going to get to a point where he's like a real threat from outside. But if he can just manage 35% from 3, I think that's good enough. Hopefully his mid-range jumper can keep on progressing, specifically that mid-range pull-up. I think John's going to be good. Giannis, depending on who you're talking to, he might have already been one of the 10 best players in the league this season. I mean, 23 points a game, nearly 9 boards a game. I want to say he was right around 5 assists. I assume the playmaking is what's going to take the next jump for him. Just more responsibilities with the ball in his hand. He does get a lot of his baskets through off-ball movement, whether it's setting a screen for someone or cutting to the rim or being awesome in transition. I do look for him to have the ball in his hands a little bit more often this season, if anything, just because Jabari Parker's not going to be there for a good chunk of it. And there's also the shooting. I mean, his three-pointer could come alive this year. I would say it'll be more of a natural progression over a couple of seasons rather than just exploding out of nowhere. But, I mean, Giannis is Giannis. I think he's got a legit shot at this one. Paul George, I mentioned earlier, I think he's in the perfect spot for himself next to Russell Westbrook because as good as PG is, I don't think he can be the main ball handler of a team just because, I mean, he averages, 4.5 assists a game. That's pretty good, but it's not the guy that I want running my offense. So he's going to be able to play off ball more and take advantage of the fact that he is an awesome shooter from pretty much everywhere. He's quietly one of the best mid-range shooters in the NBA. He's an awesome three-point shooter. He's tall, so he can come across screens, and even if his defender is kind of near him, he can still get his shot up over him. I expect his efficiency to go up, and he's one of the best defensive players in the NBA. So I think Paul George, he's got a legit shot at this one. The other one who I mentioned before was Jimmy Butler. I would say Butler is a better creator than Paul George, and I think that could be the difference. Weirdly enough, towards the end of this last season, he kind of dropped off over the last month or so, but the majority of the time, with how often he was getting to the free throw line and his efficiency from the floor on top of his improved playmaking, Butler, that dude must work out like crazy, man, because every single season he comes in with some new thing that he's able to do. So who knows, he might not even be done improving. And I think at times last season I would have had him as one of my top 10 players in the league. So Butler's good. I guess who would my actual picks be? I think I kind of made it obvious already. One of them's going to be John Wall. I think he's going to play more than perhaps someone like a Chris Paul. I think you can say that about all three of these guys, really. And, I mean, Jimmy Butler with his improvements as a playmaker, an awesome defensive player, and Giannis because the dude's a freaking cheat code. Those are my 3 picks. Shout out to DeMar DeRozan. And I'm done.